Welcome to Leadership Basics, a show built to help you be better today than you were yesterday. Today's show puts the very human definition of being better today on full display. I want to take a moment to recognize a legacy that's shaped leaders, strengthened our community, and raised the bar for what it means to give back. That legacy is known as Denis Pawley. Denis spent decades in the arena, helping lead manufacturing at Chrysler through seasons where results weren't optional. He's widely credited with championing disciplined operating systems and lean thinking. The kind of leadership that doesn't just talk about improvement, it builds it into the way people work, think, and solve problems. But what makes his story bigger than his title is what he did and what he learned. Denis didn't just succeed, he invested. His support for Oakland University helped create spaces and programs that develop people and develop capability and develop the next generation of leaders, including the work tied to lean learning and continuous improvement. That's what Leadership Basics is all about. Not hype, not slogans, the fundamentals that hold up under pressure: integrity, clarity, service, and the daily habits that make teams better. So today, we honor Denis Pawley for the standard he set and the doors he opened. And with that spirit in mind, let's get to it. Welcome to Leadership Basics, Denis.
Thanks, John.
So, Denis, you and I met because we were sitting in a room together a couple months back, and somebody mentioned to me that you had worked with someone that I considered a hero in my teens. And I said, there's no way that guy worked with Lee Iacocca. And so I went over, I introduced myself, and I said, Denis, is this true? And of course, it is true.
Yep, sure was.
And so the interesting part about your story, from what, as it was told to me, was you didn't even have a background in manufacturing. What I was told was you had a degree in human resources. Is that correct?
Correct.
So how did you end up in that role?
Well, when I graduated high school in 1959, that was the year that Oakland University admitted their first class of 599 people, kids, and I was in that class. My student number, believe it or not, was number 100. And at the time they started that school, I remember sitting in the orientation with Woody Varner, who was the chancellor at that time, and giving his speech, he said, I want you to look at the person on your left and the person on your right. And our objective is to make Oakland University the Harvard of the Midwest. And so I'm telling you right now, if you're going to try to work more than 10 hours a week and be successful in the curriculum that we're going to put on you here, you won't make it. So as I look back at that, and he was wrong, because in that graduating class there's only 99 graduated, so it was like 1 out of 6 graduated. Anyway, I was one of the ones after 2 years, after trying to work 40 hours a week, not listen to what Woody said. I didn't flunk out, but I got to the point. I said, you know, I want to be a success in this, and I just can't. There's no time to devote to do it to meet the demands of what it is. So I dropped out, went in the Army. And between reserves and active duty, I spent 6 years in the Army, and then I came out and just started a career in General Motors. Went in as a cost analyst. Did that job for about 3 months. I thought, this is the most boring thing I've ever done in my life. I can't stand just adding numbers and not knowing what's behind them or anything else. So I went to the plant manager at the time and I said, this was 1965. I said, I want to go out to the shop floor, I want to be a foreman. He said, are you nuts? I mean, at that time, that was tough jobs in the 60s. And I said, no, I just don't want to do this. So I thought, well, they'll send me to foreman training. Well, they didn't. They said, report tomorrow night to the night shift to the superintendent. He was a big Dutchman, smoked cigars and everything. He said, he'll get you started. So I went out there and he shook hands with me. He said, okay, stand here. We're standing on the line and cars coming by. He'd pick up a repair ticket and look at it, pick up a microphone and call somebody and just rip their ass up for shipping a problem. He did that for an hour. And he said, okay, I'm going to take you across the aisle and introduce you to the utility man and you're going to start. I said, oh, wait a minute, is there no training? He said, you just had the training. And so I said, okay. He said, well, before we go, do you mind if I just run over across the line and hit the head? He said, hell yes, I mind. He said, do you want to be a success in manufacturing? I said, yeah, yes, sir, I do. He said, do you know what a good manufacturing dies of? I said, no. He said, uremic poisoning. Never take a leak on company time. Scared to have, I never did for about 2 months, and I went out there. I was scared looking around every time I go if he was there. But I started in my career as a foreman, basically. And at that time, to be a foreman, all you had to know, the longest word you had to know was 4 letters long, and you had to be 6 foot and weigh 180 pounds. It was a very physical, demanding job. So I worked my way from a foreman all the way up through a superintendent. And to advance beyond that, you had to have a college degree, or they wouldn't make you private payroll. So they called me in one day and said, well, you don't have a degree, but we're going to give you the general superintendent's job. I thought, man, that's great. I'm beating the bureaucracy. I don't have to have a degree. But he said, you're going to be an acting jack. You're going to do the job. We're not going to pay you until you finish your degree. So I jumped in the car the next morning. I went out to Oakland. And I sat down with a counselor and said, well, what do you want your degree to be in? And said, you want to do in engineering or business, or what do you want to do? I said, no, from what I've seen, it's a people business. And I don't mean any disrespect to engineers or anybody else, but finding leaders who can go in and get the most out of people that people don't even think they can do, but find a way to lead them and pull them into places they don't really want to go, but try to show them the way to get there. So I said, I want to have my degree in HR with a business minor. So they said, okay. So I finished that 2 years of college and working, 50, 60 hours a week at General Motors, and did it all in night school. I went all over the county plus the campus trying to get the classes. I finished it in 2 years. The week after I finished, I got promoted to the general superintendent's job. But it is a people, I think people have the nomenclature wrong, John. They refer to the hard part of the business as the engineering and that type of part of the business, and the soft part being the people. That's completely 180 degrees wrong. You can design a part, put it on paper, and design the specifications and everything, and that part of the job is done. You do the testing and everything. And it's pretty 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how you get all that done. Moving people is the hardest part of all. Trying to people's minds sometime when they've been around the business so long are like steel traps and they're rusted shut. And you have to know how, as a leader, if you want to get the most out of people, you have to get the most out of people for the plants to succeed. You got to pry open that steel trap mind, and that takes building trust with people, creating a clear vision for where you want to go, so that people understand the crazy things you're trying to get them to do. But that takes a lot of people skills to do that, and that's what made me a success.
I agree with you. I work with engineers on multiple sides of the aisle of either mechanical, electrical, civil, and I for a while had just referred to it as the it factor, and then I started thinking, I'm like, I need to name it, because I don't want anybody to misunderstand what it is, and it is communication. You have to be able to communicate and relate and understand people. Yep. To be able to move the mission forward.
That's right.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that. So you get the promotion, and how long do you stay in that role?
Well, let's see, I think I went into that role in 1979, if I recall. And I stayed in that role until 1982.
Okay.
At which time they shut down the car assembly plant in Pontiac, put it out of business. They built a new plant out in Oregon. But they were going to launch a new product called the Pontiac Fiero. And I was promoted to plant manager and launched that new Fiero plant.
Okay.
And that was a great experience for me, because over the years I had done a lot of benchmarking of Toyota and the Japanese plants, and really had a good understanding of what their operating systems were and how they got the most out of people. So when we started the Fiero plant, we built it under the team concept. Hourly rate team leaders that were running the places, no general foreman. We eliminated that whole classification, and just had basically superintendents and foremen running the plants. Took out that whole lever, because it was a blockade to what you were trying to get done in the plants. Too many layers of management.
Okay.
And I did that. I stayed in Fiero till 1985 as plant manager, and general superintendent and then plant manager. And one day I got a request from a group of Japanese to come through Ford Motor Company, because Ford Motor and Mazda were close together, to if they could come in and tour our plant. So I said, sure. So come on in. So they did. They came in, and the Japanese come in and walked all the way through the plant and took meticulous notes of everything that was happening. I did a session with them in the conference room afterward, told them the things we were trying to achieve, and got a lot of head nodding, that because I could tell that he got a lot of this from Japanese, and
Yeah.
they were nodding their head. They understood all of it. About 6 weeks went by, and I'd had a particular tough day with my boss in General Motors at that time. And I came back to my office about 6:30 at night. My phone rang. I picked it up. It was a headhunter. He said, I'd like to talk to you about possibly taking a job with Mazda down in Flat Rock, Michigan, where Ford and Mazda are building the first Japanese plant in the U.S. for Mazda. So I said, well, I don't know. I've been here 22 years. And they said, well, we run an assessment center. We'd like you to come down and go through the assessment center. So I thought, well, I might learn something from that. I might be able to apply that someplace. So I went down and went through an assessment center with 6 other guys. I had no idea who they were. Left there, and I thought, well, that was interesting. A lot of the questions and stuff they did, and the little exercises they put you through. And that'd be the end of that. About 2 weeks later, I get a call from them. They'd like to offer you a job as vice president of manufacturing. And I thought, oh man, I've been here 22 years. Do I really want to? But I sat back and looked, and at that time, GM was just going through its umpteenth reorganization, and I did not like the direction that GM was going. Wasn't crazy about my boss. He was old school, and he and I clashed on a lot of things. Uh-huh. So I thought it, did a lot of praying about it and everything with my wife and family, and finally I decided I'm going to take that job. So I left General Motors after 22 years and went to Mazda. Spent a lot of time in Japan in my training prior to launching the plant. And I remember one meeting that I went into, that the chairman of Mazda wanted to meet me. So he calls me into his office and did the niceties and said, you have a big challenge in front of you. And I said, yeah, no kidding. I mean, I was the first American they hired. They had an interpreter with me and everything. It was a very tough time. But he said, I want you to pretend you have a zipper in your head. And I want you to unzip that right here and shake everything you ever learned about building cars and trucks in General Motors and dump it out of your head and let us replace that with the Japanese way of doing business. And I said, okay, but I'm never going to turn Japanese. He said, no, that's not the objective. We want to learn from you too, but for the first year we want to give you a new basis for how you look at how manufacturing is done. And then after that year, then you can unzip your head again, take the thing we taught you, mix it in and bring some of the GM stuff back in, put it in your head, and we come up with a new concept of how we should run plants in the United States. I said, fair enough. Well, for that next year, I mean, I almost turned Japanese. But the one thing that became obvious to me, you can't pick up a culture from a foreign country and bring their operating systems in and drop them in an American company. The cultures never match. You have to find a completely different way to sell it and do it. So after a year, I had a chance to sit with the chairman again and the president that was here. And I said, okay, here's some things that I've seen in the last year that need to change with an American workforce. And started laying out a game plan. And I could tell by the way that they stiffened up. And I was just able to never take and do that blend like the chairman had first said, because really what they wanted me to do was to control an American workforce in the UAW. They were scared to death of the UAW.
Yeah.
And I had lots of discussions with them over the next 2 years. Look, guys, you got to understand, you can't take a hard and fast law. Like one time, the president came out and did a tour of the plant, white gloves, the Japanese would walk around and touch the top of cabinets and things like that. And they'd call you back, call us, have a meeting in the conference room through an interpreter. And he basically said one day, he said, I have toured the plant and there's dust on the cabinets. I said, well, it is a manufacturing shop, you know. And he said, yes, I know, but the main thing I noticed is Americans talk to each other while they're working on the line. And we can't have that. They have to have 100% attention there. So you must tell your workforce that they can't talk. with controlled anger, I told him he didn't know what the hell he was talking about. You can't take, that's not the culture you have in this country. I can explain to him the importance of paying attention to the job, but you can't tell an American don't communicate with each other on the line. It doesn't work that way and never will. Anyway, I had lots of issues with them for like the next couple of years. I finally got to the point that there was more to life than just controlling an American workforce and solving our UAW problems for them. And again, I was one evening sitting in my, I didn't have an office. We sat out in a work van. My phone rang, and it was the president of Otis Elevator at United Technologies. And he wanted me to come out and see him. I had met the guy a couple times before, so I flew out there, and ended up they offered me a vice president of manufacturing in United Technologies in the Otis division.
Okay.
So I thought, well, after 3 years, I've sucked their brains as much as I can. There's a glass ceiling. I'm never going to go above what I am. There's more to the job than I'm capable of doing. They're never going to let you do it. And I've found since then that I think a lot of the Japanese companies that hires Americans at high levels, they hire them more as robots, as control. They never really get involved and really run a job.
Yeah.
So I went out there to United Technologies and learned a lot, but when I went in the first day, I said to the president, I know nothing about elevators, I'm going to run manufacturing. So I said, why don't you give me a union card? He said, a union card for what? I said, well, yeah, I'm vice president of manufacturing. I'm in control of all the construction sites in the country and the manufacturing plants. I want to understand and learn the nomenclature of what this is all about. So give me a union card. I'll go out and pull electrical wires on a job site or something, but I want to do that. So he said, well, you must be crazy, but we'll do it. So they did that. And I think I did that for 3 weeks. I went out and worked on some different job sites, showed them the construction superintendents had no idea who I was. But I learned a lot from that. And then when that was over and I went back to two of the construction sites I was on and walked up with a suit and tie on to the construction superintendent, I remember one of them looked at me and says, you got to be kidding, you're my boss. And he remembered the way he treated me on the job site. But I did that for a year, and I got a call one day from the HR people in Chrysler. They wanted Iacocca and Bob Lutz, who was the president at that time, wanted to see me. So I went in Detroit one day and went in and saw them, and they ended up saying, we want to offer you a job. We want you to come into Chrysler. I said, well, what do you want me to do? Well, we're going to create a staff level job, and we want you to come in and you'll report to the president. I said, no. I'm not coming into a hard-nosed country like Chrysler, the job you've created. You'll never get accepted. Don't want no part of that. When you got a job that's a real job, you call me and maybe I'll consider it. So it went by about 6 weeks, they called me again, offered me another staff level job they were creating. I said, I told you guys, I don't want no part of this. And it's got to be a true value added, not a staff function. I'm not a staffy guy. So they called me back about 6 weeks later and offered me a general manager job, having 4 car assembly plants reporting to him, and I took it and came back. So that's how I came into Chrysler. Okay.
So you mentioned while we were getting ready, a story about Iacocca.
Yes. I had that general manager's position for about 6 months, and then I didn't get along very good with the head of the executive VP of manufacturing. He was theory X and I was theory Y. Somewhere to be successful in this business, you got to come to the middle. But we just get along. Mm-hmm. And so Bob Lutz, who was the chairman, called me and said, I'm taking you out of that. I'm going to give you the engineering center out at Outer Drive where all the advanced manufacturing. I said, well, I'm not an engineer, Bob, you know that. He said, no, that, but he said, you can run people, that's all you have to have. So I went out and ran advanced manufacturing engineering for him for about a year. And then I got called into Lee's office one day and he said, you ever read The Machine That Changed the World? I said, yeah. He said, here it is. He said, my PR people gave me this, told me I should read it because this is how you change a company. I said, okay. He said, and I want you to read it like, and with your mind, if you were the executive vice president of manufacturing in Chrysler, what would you take out of that book and how would you apply it? So I said, okay, well, I was leaving for Aruba on vacation the next day. I said, well, you're gone for 2 weeks. He said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Aruba. He said, good, take the book with you, read it, outline it, bring it back, and we want to talk about it. So I go to Aruba, and I read the book. I went through and re-outlined. I said, okay, what would I do if I went into Chrysler with this? How would I change this? How would I change that? Came back, I thought, he'll never call me. First day I came back, I get a call from his secretary and said, Lee wants to see you. Can you come over? I said, no, I'm busy. I said, no, I'll be right over. So I went over, and he said, I had a folder like this. I mean, I really had a detailed job. And so it's right here, Lee. I started opening. He said, no, I don't want to open it up. I said, I want to make sure that you do what I ask you to do. And he said, I'll read this later. So he said, thanks a lot. I thought, well, that was strange. Anyway, I left, and it turns out that Bob Lutz, who had been wanting to move me into that executive vice president's job, but Lee, who didn't know me real well, he had heard a lot of reports of what I was doing in the company. That was his final test to say, is this the guy I really want to run manufacturing? And about a week later, they threw the exec VP out and made me executive vice president of manufacturing. Well, the big thing I learned from Lee, though, that was a learning thing. But he called me in one day. We were getting ready to launch a new Jefferson plant, and the preparation for it was terrible from every staff aspect. And he called me in, and he said, I forgot I laid out something he wanted me to do. And I said, Lee, I can't do that. He leaned up on his desk with both elbows like that, looked right across his aisle. He said, let me tell you something. In this business, there are people that, when they get assigned a task, a lot of people will come in and say, I don't have the resources to do it, and I don't have the time to do it, or they just plain don't want to do it that way. He said, either way, I fire people like that. But ever hear you say the word can't again, I'll fire you. And so I'll go out and get the job done. And so I've tried to divorce that. Ever since, I try to drop that word out of my vocabulary.
That's pretty powerful. So
yeah.
I realize this while you're telling the story. There may be some people who don't know who Lee Iacocca is. And so just, real briefly, because when you talk about how you came on board and the project was just a mess, people do not equate that type of leadership to Lee Iacocca.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to point out that no matter how great you are, no matter how big of your invention is, which, by the way, as I know the history, Lee was not the inventor of the minivan, but he was at the helm when the minivan came to market.
Yeah, he started in Ford as an industrial engineer, and he worked his way up through sales and got up into the upper ranks. And he and Henry Ford, the Deuce, they were like this too. Those Eagles were both so big, neither one of them could fit in the room. Well, they ended up firing Iacocca. And that was when Chrysler was really in trouble in the late 70s. Yeah. And Lee was brought into Chrysler as the CEO and chairman of Chrysler. And it was about to go under. And his management, I came in 89. So Lee had been there a while before me. But he was a Theory X guy. I always referred to him as George Patton.
Okay.
I mean, he knew what had to accomplish. He wasn't afraid of getting down and dirty with the people, but he was trying to save a company, and he was as far from of a team player as you could get. He knew in his mind what had to be done to save Chrysler, and there was no time for taking arguments or anything else. And he ended up putting a staff around him of very good ex-style managers all the way around him that were very dictatorial in how they run the business. But as I look back on that, I'd read about it before I'd go in and what he was like, and talk to Chrysler people and say, boy, this guy is Attila the Hun impersonated, And but as I look back on that, just like Patton in war, Patton said, here's the battle plan, here's what we're going to do, either follow me or get the hell out of my way. Mm-hmm. And Lee would be the same thing, either follow or get out of the way.
Yeah, that was his famous quote.
It was.
That appeared with the Dodge
and I heard
Viper.
him say that many times.
Yeah.
And so that's the way he was. And right up to the time he finally left, that's the way he was. And I really believe, John, that he saved company and served his purpose. He was Patton, just like Patton. Patton won the war, but he was wanting to continue the war all the time and throw the Russians out of Berlin and let's fight the Russians now. We're going to have a. He was most comfortable in a war zone, fighting and leading that way at the head of the spear. Yeah. But he wasn't the new type of manager that said, okay, let's run our business by teamwork, and let's get people involved, and let's do our communication, let's listen and build our organizations for the time up. And he and Bob Lutz were completely different like that.
Yeah.
Both of them very talented in what they were, but the board finally made the decision that it would best if Lee leave. But Lee's comment, if you read his book, he said, I'll leave, but anybody but Lutz. You can't bring anybody. You can bring anybody in here but Lutz. So they finally told Lee, okay, you retire. The board said, you retire, but we'll give you the opportunity. You go pick your successor. So he went to Europe and brought in Bob Eaton and into the company, and then Lee left. Mm-hmm. But he joined forces about 2 years later, with Krikorian out of MGM. That's when they come back and tried to take over Chrysler again.
Yeah.
Didn't work. They couldn't raise the money, and so we ended up getting past that and started building the company all over again. And we made the company after Lee left. I mean, Lee saved the company, and I have the world of respect for him. One of the greatest guys I ever worked for, but by far the toughest.
Yeah.
By far the toughest. But he built the foundation and gave Chrysler the strength to build upon as we went, and you brought in a new style of management. And not to say that the new managers no one ever called me Mary Poppins. I mean, I could be as tough as they could come in the plants, but I also tried to be sometimes a Gandhi, and sometimes a Patton.
Yeah.
And today's leaders, and what I found when I was in Chrysler and since, is that leaders have to be able to travel that full spectrum.
They do.
As they lead. Sometimes you got to be Gandhi, other times you got to be Patton, but most of the time you got to operate right from the middle.
Yeah.
And bend and weave, depending on whatever the business, the environment wants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you, and specifically as the generations are coming along now, you have a workforce where you could have a 20-year-old and a 60-year-old in your office.
Yes.
And in some cases maybe even older, and you have to be able to adjust your leadership style to meet whatever it is that the mission is.
Absolutely.
So I agree with that. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little more about you and your impact and what you've done for this community, because I'll be honest, when I started researching you, the people that I know who know you have always said really amazing things about your character, about your integrity. And then I go to research you for the show, and I'm after you and I had sat down to meet the first time, and you have not only poured money back into the community, but you've also rolled up your sleeves, and you're out there, you're still building today.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about that, because I really think that matters.
Okay. Well, I finally, I told you I finished my degree in night school, and
Yeah.
I finally ended up getting my degree in 1982 when I was still in GM. But when I was going through that night school, I really got an appreciation for the type of people that are in the education part of our system. A lot of them could never come in and work in the outer world, but what they do in their world, in their environment, was just outstanding. So some of the curriculum some of the professors and the curriculum they developed at Oakland over the years, starting from a green field and building that thing up, has really made that an excellent university. And when I left, when I finally left Chrysler, when the Germans came in, I could just see their culture, and our culture was never going to work. It was going to clash, and so I got out when I did. I remember telling the chairman of Daimler, when he asked me why I was leaving, I said, I wish you guys the world of luck, that this company would be successful. I really do. But if I stayed in this company, you and I would just clash constantly, because I would try to adapt the cultures, and you want to do it the German way. I could see that was going to happen. So I said, I'm just going to leave, and I'm going to go out and do my. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to form my own consulting company. So I did. And in doing that, I started teaching Lean. I set up a Lean learning center here and in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And I taught teamwork around the analogy of a NASCAR race team. So I was bringing groups of union and management people out there, put them through a racing school with Petty, They have joint teams where they simulate changing tires, driving and everything. And I'd tell them at the end, I said, watch your people work so good together trying to do that. And to a man, they would always, or a woman, they would always say, well, we want to win. I said, when you go back to your work site, don't you want to win? You can't win one team over here. It's got to be a joint team, just like the NASCAR teams. They're willing to give up a little bit for someone to make another one on their team look good. And that's the way systems have to work, and I taught that. So I did that, and then I came back out here and opened up in Novi, the first Lean Learning Center, taught that. We had 5-day courses, wrote our own courses, developed what it was going to be for Lean, and I started bringing in executives from all over, mainly the automobile industry. And I would always go in when I talked to companies about coming in and working with us, I talked to them about, now, this is a cultural change more than it is a tool change. And you have to understand what's happening at the top and change your whole culture in your company, make it a learning culture more than anything else. And the culture change has to start at the top.
Yes.
That determines culture. I think we did that for about the first 5 years after I retired. And I was able, during that whole period of time, I was able to get one CEO, 2 CEOs, I think, and 1 CFO to come. Otherwise, they were sending all lower level people in.
Yep.
Well, we would teach them all the tools and the thinking and stuff, and then we'd give them assignments to go back into their plants and start little learning areas in there and transferring their plants. And then I'd go in and do an analysis after 6 months. And invariably I'd go back in and you couldn't even tell anybody had been there. I mean, the culture was wrong. They'd come in and try to do things we taught them, and they'd get destroyed. A lot of the people weren't even there. They just wouldn't buy in.
Yeah.
So after doing that, I think it was 1996, I made up my mind that I just don't know if you're ever going to change industry leaders in their environment today. So I thought, you got to get the college kids, engross them in lean tools and leadership and thinking how that works in their college degrees. And then when they come out, then they go in, they'll take that stuff and they'll be very powerful and strong people and maybe start to change the world that way. So Gary Russi was the president of Oakland at the time. So I went and sat down with him. I said, I want to give you $1 million. And his eyes got about that big. He said, oh, thanks very much. I said, well, here's what you're going to do with it. I want to set up a Lean Learning Institute within the university. I want to train professors in all the other schools in what this is, and the objective in for them to take the Lean principles and apply that into the curriculum that they teach, blend it. And then we'll develop some Lean courses ourselves, credit courses within the university. So that's what we did. And that's how the Lean Learning Center got started, and it still exists out there today.
Yeah, I love that approach because you saw that it was hard to get these executives to change, so you said, I'll start at the beginning.
I'll start at school, in the education system.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
I'll give you a fun example. I wanted to teach the staff, Gary Russi and his staff, of what this was all about, because that was foreign to them.
Yeah.
So I said, let's take a problem that your people have got. Well, I walked around here, talked to a lot of people, and one of the things they said, you know, it takes us 3 to 4 months to get a cell phone. I said, you got to be kidding. I said, no. So I went to Gary. I said, let's do a process map. Let's get all the key guys in the room. Let's do a process map, and let's just take the process required to get a cell phone. We did that, put the yellow stickers all over the conference room and everything. As it turned out, there were 22 signatures required to get one cell phone. I started going around visiting. Everybody had their signature on that. And I asked, how do you have to sign this? I don't know, and I took this job that was there, so I just signed these things, and sometimes it lays for 2 or 3 days. We got it all done, and they were getting like a day and a half, they were getting their phones.
Yeah.
But it was a good example of the waste that exists, not just on the manufacturing floor, but in anybody that provides a service or builds a product, there's waste in it.
So there's an old, I don't even know if it's true, but there's a story about, I think I learned it going through some lean training, about a study that was done on a group of monkeys where I think there were 5 of them, and they would put food at the top of a ladder. And if the monkeys went to climb the ladder to get the food, they sprayed them with a hose, and they don't like water.
Yeah.
And so they only had to do that a couple times before they would just not touch the ladder. And then they took one monkey out and they put a new one in who didn't know, and that monkey went to climb the ladder. Nobody sprayed him, but the other monkeys pulled him off the ladder.
Oh.
And it was an interesting study. And so now this one's like, why can't I have the food? And it was an interesting study because I think it relates to humans who sometimes they don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They're just doing it because they've always done it that way.
Because everybody else does it that way. That's
Yeah.
right. And that's why change never happens.
Yeah.
I tell people, and I've done this for years, that I ask people, what's the difference between a leader and a manager? And a lot of people look at you and say, well, a manager is our leader. And it may be, but that's not the way it's supposed to be. I mean,
Right.
a leader only has one value to the shareholder. Only one. He doesn't drive any bolts, he doesn't design anything, he doesn't buy any parts, he doesn't make lines run, nothing. And that's to add value, to drive the stock up. And so I used to tell people after I do a lot of lean training with them and leadership training, I'd say, when you go to work every day, you ought to say to yourself, okay, I've got a shareholder strapped to my side here. And of the $200,000 I make a year, how much of what I do does he think is worth $200,000?
Yeah.
And I actually did at one time put a time study guy with me who understood what I was trying to do and had him do a time study for me, if you will. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, tell me how much of the things that I did during the day was really value added in the eyes of a shareholder. That number, as I recall, came out 17%.
Yeah.
The rest of the time you're overlapping into somebody else's job, into your comfort zone. You're not out driving change and forcing change, and you're just not doing it.
So we were in retail. So we took lean and we flipped it to focus on a couple of different aspects of retail. So I was logistics in my career, and we focused lean principles on supply chain and making it more effective. And so instead of shareholders, what we did, same theory, we said, how much value does this process add to the customer? And are we removing friction points for the customer to do business with us? So same theory, just...
Same thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people say to me, well, how did you make... We changed a lot of things in Chrysler. I mean, we rebuilt the whole way that the culture on the factory floor and how cars are built, and we really did some major changes. People say, well, how did you do that? I said, well, I have a little formula that I've used all my life of how you make change happen. Number one, as a leader, some people say you got to be dissatisfied. I said, no, you have to hate the way things are. I mean, you literally have to hate the way things are. And you can't just walk around and say, well, I don't like that. I mean, but combined with showing people that you hate the status quo, you have to paint for them a vision of what has to change and where you think your business can go down the road if you constantly apply change and make things get better and better and better. And leaders constantly have to do that. And I always say, my history found as I tried to develop what in Chrysler, what I call the Chrysler operating system, that I copied a lot of it off of the Toyota production system, but Americanized it.
Yeah.
And teaching people that is and how you had to run it, and that was vital. But once you create a vision of where you want your organization to go, you have to communicate that to the people. And whatever time you budget of your time to do the communication, make people clearly understand that vision, whatever that is, you have to multiply that by a factor of 10. Because it takes that long in order to fully drive and get people to internalize that and understand it so they know where you're going. And even after they do that, they're going to say, holy cow, okay, I understand what he wants to do, but man, this is risky. I could, a foreman could say, I tried changing some of my volume will slip and I'll get fired, and I'm afraid to do that. So the leaders have to say, okay, here's the vision, everybody understands it. Now, everybody's job has to change in order to make that happen. Me included as the top guy. Mm-hmm. So I have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to be willing to take the first steps to show people that I'm going to take the biggest risk of anybody, changing myself to accomplish this vision. And only then, when people see you visibly demonstrating that, will they fall in line behind you. One of the things when I used to go into work every morning, I'd always have on my desk would always be the production counts from the night before. And a traditional manufacturing guy would look at that and say, oh, this plant missed it by 25 jobs, so you get on the phone and rip that plant manager's ass up, you know, and just beat the hell out of him first thing in the morning. So when I started telling people that my new vision, what I wanted to go, I said, my job's got to change. Because in today's world, if you can't teach, you can't lead.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm going to show you that I'm going to change some things the way this job runs. So I called my production control people and said, I never want to see a production count on my desk again until the end of a quarter, a week before the end of the quarter. Then you can bring it to me. I don't want to be distracted from what my job is. You know, my job has to be a visionary. I have to be out front driving change, and I can't be bothered by, we lost 2 cars this hour. And so I don't want to ever see that stuff again. And there was another one that I did lift on my shoulder, that we used to always have to plant a chart and report. You had to report to the government accidents, lost time accidents. And there'd be big charts in the plants of, here's our safety report, here's how many accidents we had. And so I went in and I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I never want to see one of those charts again. What I want to see is a chart that shows me how many times did an accident almost happen. I want you to chart instances where an accident almost happened instead of accident. There's nothing value added when a person's already been hurt by putting a sign up saying they were hurt. The value added and the way you get better is measuring what the near misses, I call them, the near misses. Chart those for me. And if you have enough of the near misses, that other chart takes care of itself. But it's just setting those type of examples of how you're going to change the way you think about management. That I'm sending this message mainly to my direct reports, because a lot of them were saying, yeah, this guy won't last. You know, he's not getting the production counts and stuff like that. And I used to tell them, no, production counts will come if you're doing all the other things I'm trying to teach you. But the hard part about that, John, was when I laid that vision out and I developed a whole series of courses that I was going to cascade teach down the organization of what a Chrysler operating system was and how it should work and how the managers have to change. I had some guys working for me that really internalized that, vice presidents and general managers said, oh, we've been waiting for this. Mm-hmm. Others that gave it lip service. And over the course of the first 2 years, I fired 2 vice presidents and I think 2 general managers. Not because they didn't know how to build cars, but they didn't know the right way to build cars and what it was going to require to make the vision happen.
Yeah.
So that was the patent part of me that come out. Now, if I had a guy that was really struggling and said, okay, but I don't understand the thing, I'd have all the time in the world to work and teach with a person like that. But if I would go in and teach some classes like that, and then they had to go in and make things, small learning labs in their plants, I'd go in and see nothing happening. That just said to me, it's not that this guy don't understand, he don't believe in it.
Yeah.
Those people have to go. But I would be very Gandhi-like. I'd have empathy for people and try to spend time with them and teach them, and just work that all the way down through an organization. But I was at Chrysler for 10 years, and I probably succeeded, I don't know, accomplishing 60% of what I was trying to accomplish and changing that. And we made a lot of tremendous gains, even with that 60%. But when I left, there was still 40% more to do. But I could see when the Germans were coming in that the arrogance of a German says they're going to come in and they would want to put all their new stuff in, and that's what they did when they came in. And within a year after I left, a lot of the things we put in place and things we were doing was being replaced by bureaucracy of the Germans, and you see what happened to the company. It just went right down the drain.
So now you're focusing on college students.
Yep.
And I know you're working on a new program right now to try to drive up enrollments at Oakland University.
Yes.
Did you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, the demographics of the world in this state of this country now, there's the population's dropping, so there aren't as many kids coming out of high school as in numbers that were going to college in the past. And I think of the 13 state universities that we have, that state appropriations have to cover the bulk of their operating costs. I would guess that 3 of them won't be here in the next 10 years. And so the ones that are going to survive are going to have to find different ways of how they recruit and how they keep their enrollments up in order to meet the cost pressures that are going to happen. And their traditional ways of getting kids to come. They'll open their doors and say, okay, we're going to give a 4-hour orientation here. Come on in, and they put them in a conference room and lecture to them. Okay, this happens in this area, this happens in this area, but they're horrible. They're boring. I went in and sat on a couple of them. I told the president, you know, if I were a new student thinking about coming here and I went into that, I'd fall asleep. I'd never step foot on this campus again. The whole thing's got to be rebuilt. You got to redesign it. Well, that felt some arguing with the president, everybody else, and the provost. And anyway, I said, let me tell you here's what I'd like to do. I said, I'm on the Optimist Club at Clarkston, and I said, I'm an optimist about Clarkston. I'm an optimist about everything in life right now, but I'm also a realist who says everything's got to change. So I said, what I'd like to do is select 75 sophomores and juniors from Clarkston High School. And I would like to bring them out here on campus for 3 days. I want them to spend 2 days in the dormitories at night. I want to run them through everything that the university has to offer for 3 solid days, so that they really understand, wow, what this is. And rather than making a decision on where they're going to college because that's where their friends are going, which is probably half the kids that go to college, that's what they, but I want them to understand what Oakland has to offer, and I know I'm a product of it. Mm-hmm. And try to use that to help increase the enrollment. Well, one of the things run into is, well, you know, we can do that, but we're going to have to charge like $500 a student maybe to do this. And I said, yeah, you're insane. I mean, if I bring 75 students out here, each student that decides off of that to come to university is going to bring in $100,000 minimum of revenue into the university. And that just blows away the peanuts you would charge for a registration.
Right.
And the return on that investment will be huge if we do it right. So I got a lot of, well, maybe, how about we just do a day? I said, no, that's not going to do it. I mean, you've got to buy into this and completely change the way you recruit students. And so we're doing it. And the 19th, 20th, and 21st of May, we'll have our first class out there. If that works, if it goes across well as a pilot, we're going to contact 3 or 4 more school districts around the Tri-County area and try to do the same thing with them every year. And that would be a hell of an recruitment and enrollment one-up for the school.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I'm going to lecture in one of those and everything, so it'll be good.
So, you know, what I'm seeing across the board as a career coach, that what you're describing is happening in every industry everywhere. I've got clients who do a variety of different tasks that require a college degree, and we're talking engineering type of roles, and they're having a harder and harder time getting recruits to come out of college because they just aren't there. The students are not going to college.
That's right.
And so I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, because I can see that it matters, and I can see that there's a problem there.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's good. You know, it used to be the automobile business was competitive. I'm going to tell you, the university is going to be competitive for the limited amount of product that's coming out. It used to be you could just open the doors and people would walk in.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
No.
The numbers really dwindled down.
So a couple leadership questions for you. From your perspective throughout the years, you've gotten a lot of advice from a lot of people who have been really successful.
Yeah.
What is the most overrated leadership advice you've ever received?
Overrated?
Overrated.
Wow. When I first went in to the automobile business, basically the way the philosophy in the automobile business was heat it, beat it, and ship it. And the old guys used to tell us, as long as you make your production numbers every day and ship those things out every day, you don't have to worry about another thing in life, and it don't matter how you do it. If that requires you beat the hell out of people and you piss off the union, you do that. But whatever you have to do to heat it, beat it, and ship it, and make those production counts every day, that's all that's important. Worst advice I ever got in my life, because you were never successful at it.
Yeah, it's.
I tell you how everybody has a change in their life, and when I went out and started in that system, I could be a very badass foreman, and I was. And my badge of courage was to create the most grievances from the UAW every night on my shift than anybody else, and that got you promoted. They said, oh, that guy's got a big set of kahunas, you know. And so you get promoted to a general foreman, and I went up the ladder that way. Well, when I got to a superintendent, the first time I became a superintendent, we had to get a new plant manager come in. And he watched us operate. He spent a lot of time on the floor, and he called me into his office one day, and he said, you know, Denny, I think you got a lot of capability and could go a long way in this business. But he said, the way you treat people is horrible. And I said, that's the way I've been trained, Bob. I mean, that's the way you beat the hell out of people, and that's how you get results. He said, no, that world's changing. So I'm going to send you to school. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm going to send you to sensitivity training. Remember those programs?
I teach some of them now.
Well, they sent me to a class, and I think it was run in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I walked in there, and there were 6 of us, all strangers. Mm-hmm. And it was run by 2 psychologists. And they walked in the room. I'll never forget this as long as I live. It was probably the most life-changing thing I ever went through. They had a big easel, said, tear off one of those big easel sheets and tape it on the wall behind your head. Now, everybody got up and did that, and they said, now, I want you to take the next hour and really think about this. Probably you never had a chance to do this in your life. Write down the 5 adjectives that best describe you in your work life. So everybody sat there. They left the room. So we're all sitting there looking at each other, and we go stairs like this. And finally, some guy get up and write something up there on the mat. So I thought, well, I got to write something down. So I said, empathy. I can show empathy. The 5 adjectives I wrote up was what I thought they'd want to hear in that room. That wasn't me. I mean, I knew better than that. It's deep inside of me somewhere there was, but that wasn't me in my life, because I was operating in an environment that really wasn't me. But to survive, I had to become something of what it really wasn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got up and wrote some I don't remember just what they were, but they were 180 degrees from what was really me. But anyway, then the psychologists come back in the room, and they walked around and have everybody stand up and talk about it. Why do you say that about yourself? Then I say, okay, we're going to leave for a couple hours. You guys just sit and talk to each other, get to know each other. So we did that, and you could begin to see that what this guy across the room was saying, because then he started to talk about, my job, I do this or I do that, and I'd say, well, that's not what that adjective says, So nobody get up and change anything. But after a couple hours, after we were doing this and challenging each other a little bit, they'd walk back in the room and say, well, does anybody want to change anything on their sheet? I think somebody got up and changed something. I said, well, that's good, but the rest of you still believe that's what you really are, huh? Well, no one wanted to say anything different. This went on for 3 days. 3 days. By the end of that 3 days, everybody in that room had stripped themselves down of what they would like the world to think they are and put down there what they really are. So I wonder why it's run by psychologists. Well, including me, everybody in that room at one point in time were moved to tears. For the first time, you're really taking a look at yourself. And then they processed all that for us and saying, okay, you guys have really come out and identified for yourself what you really are. Mm-hmm. Now, then had discussions, why can't you be that when you go back into your work environment?
Yeah.
And I thought about that for a long time. I thought, well, I'll probably get fired, but I'm really going to go back and try. I went back, and the first day I went back, the manager called me in and said, what'd you learn? So I walked him through that, and he said, I want you to start practicing that. And I said, okay, I'll do my best. And I started to walk to the door. He said, I told you before, you got a lot of capability. And if I don't see the change in you, you're going to be the first one on this plant I'm going to fire as a new plant manager. I mean, that was the most, if I looked at anything that shaped my life, any training I've ever had, being forced to look who you really are and saying, why am I that same person? Why have I been this imposter for so many years?
Yeah.
So I went back and physically started trying to change that. And I was working, I say as a superintendent, I was working for my degree at that time too. And I started challenging my boss, who was as hard-nosed as you could get. And they ended up pulling him out. And that's when they made me the acting Jack General Foreman until I finished my degree.
Yeah.
And I was able to start from that level, then start mirroring the real me and telling people it's okay to be you, providing you don't become Gandhi every day. I mean, and that's where I started spreading that stuff, Gandhi, and patting across and demonstrating that every day. But that's probably the most meaningful thing, John, that I ever went through in my life.
Well, I appreciate that. And it leads me into my next question, and it's based on everything that you just said. I'm very interested in this answer. What is your non-negotiable as a leader today?
You have lots of people. I haven't had that problem since I consulting because I don't negotiate with myself. But looking back on it, as I went through that training, there was just ways I made myself, I'm going to be true to myself. And that's non-negotiable.
Yes.
I'm not going to have somebody who is really who they are. I mean, that's the way they act. I'm not going to let them influence me anymore. And it's a real challenge and sometimes can be suicidal. If you don't have enough confidence in yourself, you could lose your job. But it's I reached a point that I was so uncomfortable living in that environment, being someone I really wasn't, that, I mean, I became that person when I walked in the plant. I was a different person when I walked out and went home to my family. And it shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't have to change yourself. So it's non-negotiable for me to someone and come say, you can't act that way.
Yeah, so I love that. And I will tell you that, I think I've told you this before, I was introduced to John Maxwell in 1999, and I was 24, 25 at the time. And that was one of the first lessons that I learned from his teaching was you have to have integrity to yourself. And recently I had a coach, a fellow coach, I say recently, but it could have been a year ago, and we were on a podcast together, and he asked the panel a question. He said, how would you rate your integrity to other people on a scale of 1 to 5? And everybody gave their answer. And then he said, how would you rate your integrity to yourself on a scale of 1 to 5? And that was a moment that made me stop in my tracks. And you mentioned this a minute ago, that you negotiate with yourself.
Yeah.
And it's that moment where, you know, and I'll use some generic examples where, okay, I'm not going to get up and go to the gym this morning because it's raining outside, or you make excuses for why you're gonna not service yourself, not be your true self. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing that story. Before we wrap up, Dennis, is there anything else that you want to share? Any little lessons or tidbits?
I started to talk about the formula for change.
Yeah.
And that's something I had, that little formula I kept in my mind. It's basically, hate the way things are, have a clear vision of where you want to go, be willing as a leader to step up and take the first step, showing people you're going to change. If you do all those three things together, you're going to overcome the natural resistance to change that comes from the workforce. Because the workforce don't want to change. But if you do all three of those things and do them effectively and do them right, with integrity, and sell it not as another program you're bringing in, but just a new concept, the way you're going to run your operations, and role model that every day. Because you're on the stage every day. When you bring something like that, a new guy comes in and going to do something like that, you're on stage every day. And people can see through empty suits. But you're being tested in every day. People test you in different circumstances and see how you're going to react. And I've had some bad days in business, in the plants, in the corporation. And there'd be times that I really want to fall back and pull those tools of intimidation and bestiality, if you will, out of my toolbox and just beat the hell out of people.
Yeah.
But you constantly have to say, where are we really going with this? What do I really want to be? Who's the real me? And always have that on display, because people can pick up fakes anytime.
Yeah.
And they know the difference between a program and something that really has meaning. I wouldn't let them, when I was introducing the Chrysler operating system, I wouldn't let them put banners up, COS. I said, no, this isn't a program. This is a new way of doing. It's something we all have to internalize. I wouldn't let them put that stuff up, because then it becomes a program. People see that.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't let them do that. It has to be natural, and you have to lead it and know you're on stage every day and be willing to be measured and prove who you are to people. But that's why it takes so long to do it. I had 80,000 people working for me in 52 different locations when I took over that job in Chrysler. And it's too much for you to control. I mean, you have to have a system you're trying to put in place. And as I look back on it, I always say to myself, is there any way I could have done that faster? And there wasn't. I mean, a culture changes. You can change product models and everything in your plants every 2 or 3 years, and you just start on with a new one. Culture takes years and years and years to cultivate. But if you don't do it, sooner or later you're going to have failure.
Yeah. You know, I love hearing the people side of the leadership, and for the last several years I've focused pretty heavy on the engineering side because that's who my clients were. And yeah, I have tremendous respect for what these engineers, and not, actually I'll take it a step further, not just the engineers, but what the factory workers bring to life. And the progress that has been made since, I would say in the last 3 decades of safety and innovation. And I'm proud of the fact that the people that I interact with in this community are a huge part of some of these inventions that have saved lives. You know, we've talked in the past about my neighbor who was a part of the OnStar team. And then you think about all these things that happened. They wouldn't have happened if you weren't leading the people in the right direction.
That's right.
So I will tell you, as a generation behind you, I appreciate what you did, because you've made it so that my kids are safer now today, and the kids will just keep getting safer. So
the good thing about, and we started talking about culture change, I mean, when I first went into the business, they'd never let me in the design studios because I had grease on my feet, literally. I mean, you just take manufacturing guys, they don't know nothing anyway. But when Lee left and we developed the platform system type of manual, where you develop programs on a common platform with engineered manufacturing, purchasing people all on the same team, everything changed. And believe me, I have a tremendous amount of respect for engineers too. Without them, there wouldn't be plants. But without the people in the plants, there wouldn't be engineers. Yeah. And you have to understand each other's strengths and what you bring to the party. And one can't. Too many companies today, they operate in silos. I mean, engineering does this, passes it off to the next staff, passes it off to the next staff, and then all the mistakes end up in the factory when you're trying to build things. Where when you're working together all the way up front, those problems get solved early. And that was Chrysler's biggest success. They brought everybody in as you started from concept on, and a program couldn't be passed off from engineering to manufacturing unless I signed off on the program saying it was ready.
Yeah.
And there was no jealousy or anything about that. That's just the way the system worked. But 20 years ago, I've been gone 20 some years now. 30 years ago, that never would have worked, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, egos would just drive everything. But today there's no room for egos in companies anymore. There's just not. If you go in with a large ego and carrying a chip on your shoulder for everything, you won't last.
That's true.
You won't last.
And it doesn't matter what industry. That's true.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's that way in society now.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what you know and what you plan to get things done with your knowledge is what matters.
Yes.
If there's no more in a day where one person knows everything. It doesn't work.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Des, thank you so much. I
okay.
Really
Enjoyed it, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so as we wrap today's episode of Leadership Basics, I want to leave you with a simple reminder. Legacy isn't something you talk about. It's something you practice. When you look at the example Denis Pawley set, you see more than generosity. You see involvement. You see someone who didn't just write a check and disappear. He helped build people, build programs, and build opportunity that will outlive any job title. That's the spirit we're after. Making the room better because you walked into it. Helping up the next person because someone once helped you. Choosing to learn, to serve, to mentor, to show up, even when no one's clapping, because your ripple matters. Not someday, today. So here's your challenge. Don't wait for a perfect moment to give back. Give your time, give your attention, give your experience. Encourage someone, teach someone, open a door, make a call. Pick one small action this week that leaves your corner of the world stronger than you found it. Thanks for spending time with us on Leadership Basics. If this episode gave you something to think about, share it with someone who cares about doing leadership the right way. Until next time, be better today than you were yesterday, and keep your ripple moving.